Hello, this is James. We got a new ban list just now. Let's talk about it. So, we're getting some stuff, we're getting some good stuff, and then they're doing some weird stuff. We go into our skill rebalancing, and when I first saw this, I was like, rebalancing all of these draw skills that nobody ever uses? What are you doing, Konami? And then I was like, no wait, they're strengthening, which is weird if you're used to Duel Link's ban list in the past. Usually they just take away fun stuff, but here they're making fun stuff more possible. So you can, for the cost of no longer 1800 life points or 1500 or whatever it was, you can draw your zombies, you can draw your level 8 warriors, you can draw your glossy prisma, harpy monsters, insect monsters, roid monsters, not just Vehicroids, any roid monsters, gravekeepers monsters, Jinzo or psychics, dinosaurs, and spellcasters, and cyberdark monsters off of a cosmic cyclone. So minus 1,000, and then you can draw those crucial monsters. Probably the most consequential of these skills is going to be your Kybercorp Bling and your Cosmic Enlightenment. So Kybercorp Bling, if you just have all non-glossies, if you have all whatever basic, I think they're basics, and glossy cards, you can activate Kybercorp Bling and you draw just those glossy prismatic cards, and it can be effectively used to search any card in your deck. So now, for example, whether or not Konami gives away a Jinzo that is glossy is now important, right? Used to be that Kybercorp Bling was minus 1800. It was basically Destiny Draw. It was hard to activate it, but again, off of a single Cosmic Cyclone, that is now possible. And now we're going to be paying very close attention to those powerful cards that are given to us as glossies, as prismatics. Does this make the God cards competitively viable? I don't think so, but it's going to be much easier to make those YouTube decks using them. And I'm sure that this is going to be used strategically, and also for your Jinzo. We're also pumping up Harpy's Last Will. It's no longer 5 or more Harpies, it's 4 or more Harpies. This does not solve the Harpies issue, which is not back row removal, but front row removal. And Miracle Fusion time is no longer 1,000 or below, it's now 2,000 life points or below to activate. This is fine, whatever. Now you can make your Miracle Fusion decks more easily. Elemental Heroes are still bad. What's interesting here is that there's nothing on this list about Trick Up the Sleeve. Trick Up the Sleeve to draw, which basically everyone is using for Cosmo Brain and not Dark Magician. So the classic Konami thing would be like, what we imagine is their programmers are like, what? Nobody's using that for Dark Magician? I thought we just had a bunch of Dark Magician fanboys. They're using it for Cosmo Brain? A different level 7 or higher Dark Spellcaster. What? Obviously they're not ignorant of the way that Trick Up the Sleeve is being used, but Trick Up the Sleeve Blue Eyes has not been seen on the ladder for some time. It's been mightily power crept by the Koakai, so I guess it's not that weird, but it's just that's what everyone expected was Trick Up the Sleeve, and instead we're getting a bunch of skills strengthened, and that's positive. Now for the weird stuff. All right, now, what you came here to see, frankly, the Forbidden Limited List implementation, semi-limited. Only 2 cards from the semi-limited list can be included in your deck, and we have Spellbook of Fate, Sun, Sword, Slash, and then previously Baby Tiger was semi-limited, and now he can soothe the wounded soul of his mistresses, who still have all their other important stuff limited. Alright, so first, let's talk about Spellbook of Fate. Spellbook of Fate, this is actually more significant than it seems, because if you first see Spellbook of Fate on the limited list, you're like, okay, whatever. You still have 2 to play around with, and every single spellbook card in the deck is effectively searchable by will, because you have 6 searchers in your deck and tons of recycling and all of that. But what Spellbook of Fate does, being on the semi-limited list, basically only having 2 copies does, well, first of all, the first and most obvious thing is that Spellbook players, they like their free removal, and so that means that they can no longer play Treacherous Trap Hole, right? That it has natural synergy with the deck. You have your Silent Waifu, you have all your spells, and you have your Treacherous Trap Hole. That is no longer possible because you're definitely going to want to have your... It's not 1 Spellbook of Fate and 1 Treacherous, it's 2 Fate and 0 Treacherous. Hard stop. So Spellbook of Fate is basically no longer available in the deck. Once you get into your Spellbook combo and you have your Spellbook of Fate out, you only have 2 of them, and that means you no longer have the option to draw it from the deck if you don't want to recycle it that turn. So, like, you have your Spellbook of Fate out, you banish, you send to the graveyard, you banish the cards from your graveyard, you send your opponent's monster, whatever, to the banish pile, and then your first Spellbook of Fate goes into the graveyard, right? Then the next time you activate Spellbook of Fate, you on, say, your opponent's turn, you make sure you banish Fate, so now your first Fate is in the banish pile, your second Fate goes to the graveyard, and then whatever, you banish your opponent's Anki. And then you take your turn, right? Now, when you play Spellbook of Eternity, you must add Spellbook of Fate, the first one, from your banish pile to your hand, because you don't have the option of playing Spellbook of Secrets to search your third Spellbook of Fate from the deck, which you don't have because it's on the semi-limited list. So it's more significant than it seems. I'm sure good Spellbook players, this is just a paper cut. And more importantly, what this will do is it will eliminate incompetent Spellbooks playing. Now only the nerdiest of magicians will be able to shuffle around the Spellbook cards. And it's hard to not see symmetry here. They semi-limit the Silent Waifu deck. Basically, the Spellbooks deck is the Silent Waifu deck. And then they pre-limit the Silent Swordsman deck, because this is an EX structure deck. Well, the Silent Waifu is. And then Silent Swordsman presumably will be. But that deck hasn't even come out yet, and they're already nerfing it. So this card survived the nerfs. We had Silent Swordsman level 3 OTK past KC Cup. Basically, Silent Swordsman level 3, you have your Silent Sword Slashes, you use Dark World Dealings into the Void, bunch of draw cards, direct attacking cards, level 3s, and then your Silent Sword Slash. And what Konami did was they limited all of the directing attacking cards. They limited the Secret Pass to the Treasures, and they limited the Assault Armor. But they left Silent Sword Slash untouched because we were like, yeah, Silent Swordsman structure deck coming. They're going to let us run wild with it for 3 months and then put it on the limited list. But here, they are pre-nerfing the deck, which makes sense because unlike Spellbooks, which are a deck that you can potentially buy with no money, again, the Silent Swordsman deck is presumably going to be an EX structure deck. It must cost money, and they don't want people to spend that money only for them to semi-limit the card, and then the people get upset. So the pre-semi-limit of the Silent Sword Slash is unprecedented in Duel Links, a deck we were all look. Complain about the cancer all you want. Everybody eagerly anticipates the cancer for, until it comes, and then for maybe a couple weeks afterwards, and they're like, okay, I'm sick of winning with this deck. I'm sick of trading with this deck on the ladder. But for those 2 weeks, it is glorious, and to pre-limit the Silent Sword Slash, because presumably you would want to play Silent Sword Slash now, because we don't have the card, we haven't played with them, we haven't made the decks. Like when I first did an analysis of Silent Swordsman, I said, yeah, makes any warrior deck stronger. But now you can't just stick it into any warrior deck. You can't stick it in your Masked Heroes deck. You can't stick it into your Amazoness deck. Because Silent Swords / conflicts with Princess and Celestial. Yeah, again, the reason for doing this is obvious, but the card that searches your Silent Swordsman monsters, the card that makes Silent Swordsman level 7 bigger than any other monster in the entire game, and also invulnerable for a turn. It's a different way of managing the game than Duel Links has seen before. So that's it for the ban list implementation discussion. Thank you for watching.